Hey guys, Luke here, and in today's tutorial, we will be creating some cool text effects and animations inside of HitFilm. Two of these effects, however, can only be done inside of HitFilm 2 Ultimate because they involve the shatter effect. Other than that though, everything can be animated inside of HitFilm Express. We will first begin by adding effects to create a custom text, and we'll work our way up from there. In the beginning of the video, we'll be keyframing single attributes for single objects, and by the end of the video we'll be animating multiple things for multiple objects. This tutorial will probably be extremely long, so hopefully you guys can stick in there and hopefully you'll learn something. Alright, so here we are inside of HitFilm 2 Ultimate, and I have my video properties set to 1920 by 1080 with a frame rate of 29.97. So first off, let's create a new composite shot, and I'll call this one background. And I'm going to start off by making a new plane. I'm going to call this one white. And then I'm going to drag a radial gradient onto it. And I'm just going to make a nice background. So crank down the inner radius, crank up the outer radius, change the color of the outer radius, and then we will increase the smoothness and then increase the opacity of the outer radius. So now we have a nice gradient background like this. I did a tutorial on gradient backgrounds if you want to learn some more advanced tips. And now we're just going to take our text tool by hitting T, and we're going to type in our name, and then hit Control A to select it all, center it, crank up the scale, change the font, and I will be using Champagne and Luminous with a bold font. And then I'm going to change the fill color to be gray and the stroke color to be dark gray with a stroke of about 8 pixels. So now we have something like this, and it's looking pretty nice. So just to make sure that it's centered, I'm going to create a new grade, and I'm going to put on the title safe guides, and I'm just going to line up my text to make sure that it's in the middle. Alright, so that looks pretty nice. And now we're going to apply some effects to the text, because it's looking kind of bland right now. So first one we're going to apply is a drop shadow. So drag the drop shadow onto the text, then we'll go to our controls in the top left and increase the distance to about 8 pixels, change the angle to around 160, actually I'd say 150, and then we will change the penumbra to 5 pixels, which kind of softens the shadow, and now we have some really nice looking text. So another thing we're going to apply is another radial gradient effect. So let's drag that onto the text, and you'll see it looks kind of strange right now, but we're going to edit the properties. So let's go to the elliptical deformation, crank it up all the way, and then what we're going to do is go to the inner radius, decrease it slightly to around 10 pixels, go to the outer radius, decrease that as well to around 330, and then change the color to be black. So something like this. And what we're going to do now is go to the blend mode at the very bottom and change it from none to overlay. And now we have this really cool looking text, kind of like looks like chrome, and I'm pretty happy with it. So you could apply more effects onto your text, but personally this is good for me. So what I'm going to do is highlight both of my layers and hit Ctrl C. This will copy them, and now I will create another composite shot, and this one I will call Text Animation 1. Alright, so let's hit Ctrl V, and it will paste our text and our background into this composite shot. So let's start off and go under the text, go into the transform properties, go to the 1 frame mark, set a keyframe for the opacity, and then we'll go to the 0 second mark and change the opacity to 0. And HitFilm will automatically create a keyframe for you, so it goes from 0 all the way up to 100. So this is a simple fade effect for the text, and it looks really nice. So let's create another new composite shot. We'll call this one Text Animation 2. Once again, we're going to paste the text and background layer. And now we're going to do some more animation. So let's go under the transform properties of this. And what we're going to do is hit Ctrl D on the text, and this will duplicate it. And I will click F2 on one of the text layers and name it to underscore. Not sure what the correct name is for that symbol. And then we are going to select the layer that says underscore, and we are going to take the text tool by hitting T, highlight it, and then make a whole bunch of lines. So something like this. And now what we're going to do is take the selection tool by hitting V, and we are going to drag it to the bottom of the text. So something like this. And then we're going to hit Ctrl D on the underscore layer and take the duplicated layer and drag it on top of the text. You can use your up and down arrow keys, or any of your arrow keys, and change the position. So now we have something like this, which looks pretty sweet. And what I'm going to do now is apply some position keyframes to the text. So let's go to the 1 second mark, set a keyframe on the position, just like what we did with the last animation. Then we're going to go to the 0 second mark, and we're going to drag it down below the bottom line. So something like this, and you'll see if we play through the animation, the text slides up. So next thing we're going to want to do is create a mask on the text layer that has our name. So let's create a mask between the 2 lines, and then let's go under the mask properties, set a keyframe for the path at the 0 second mark, and then set a keyframe for the path at the 1 second mark. So at the 1 second mark, we are going to readjust it so that it is in the same position that it was at the 0 second mark. So if we watch our animation, we have the text sliding up and into place, and that looks pretty sweet. So moving on to text animation number 3. So once again, hit Ctrl V, paste the text and background in, and this one we are going to make a flapping sign kind of effect. So let's go to the controls in the top left and change the anchor point. So for example, if we are to rotate the text right now, it rotates from the middle. Just like if we scale the text, it scales from the middle. So by changing the anchor point to be at the top or bottom or whatever, it'll change the part from where the text rotates or scales from. So for this, we're going to drag the anchor point of the text to be at the very top. So something like this, where the red X line is going across the top of the text. And then what we're going to do is reposition it to the center of the screen. And now if we are to rotate it or apply any kind of transformations, it'll do it from that point. So what we're going to do is make this a 3D layer by hitting the plane symbol beside the text layer. And now we have this 3D camera. And the reason why we are making this 3D is so that we can rotate it in the x-axis. So we can make keyframes so that it makes I guess like a sign. So let's go under the transform properties, go to the X, and start making some keyframes. So we'll set one at the 0-second mark, and then we'll set one at around the 1.5 second mark. So I'm not going to be very precise here, but that's just because this is an example. So my physics are probably going to be extremely off, but pretty much we're going to go and at the beginning make it face one way, go a few frames, have it swing around so that it faces the opposite way, and then repeat this process. So this is just an example. Looks pretty good. I just have random attributes for the X rotation, but it actually came out quite well. Just remember that you want it to go down in amount each time that you make a keyframe. So for example, this is what I have. So I have -92, then I go to 80, then I go to -67, then I go to 34, then -20, and then finally 0. And that's all over the course of 1.5 seconds. So yeah, you guys could be more precise, but hopefully I got my point across there. So let's create another new composite shot. Call this one text animation 4. Once again, paste the background and text layer into it. Alright, so these next two effects that I'll be using are HitFilm Ultimate only, I'm afraid, because we're going to be using the shatter effect. So let's drag that onto the text, and you'll see that if we play through the animation right now, the text explodes. So we're going to change some of the attributes. So I'm going to go to the controls in the top left, leave the position at where it is, and then go to the pattern, change it from bricks to hex, then change extrusion from 10 to 0, increase the size a little bit to, for example, 18, and then I'm going to go to the physics, go under the forces, crank up the radius all the way, crank up the strength all the way. Actually, I don't know. I'll just set the strength at 1500. And then depth, I'm going to change to 1000. So if we watch right now, we can see the text kind of explodes and falls onto the ground. And what we're going to do now is change the gravity properties from a strength from 500 to 0. So now they're not going to fall down. Or sorry. Yeah, that's right. And then we can leave the rest of the gravity properties. And then simulation, we're going to change the rotation speed to 0, randomness to 0. So now we have this kind of effect. And then we're going to change the timing to start at the 4-second mark and end at the 5-second mark. So we have our text and then it explodes. Now you'll see as we play through, the text kind of moves forward. So we're actually going to keyframe some properties. So let's go transform and set a keyframe at the 4-second mark for the scale, and then set another keyframe at the 5-second mark. So at the 5-second mark, we're going to change it to be a little bit smaller, such as 85%. So now if we watch this animation, it goes and explodes like that, and the text stays relatively the same size, which looks pretty sweet. If you wanted this to explode and then turn into the text, you could just apply a reverse effect onto the text. So it would go something like this. Which looks pretty sweet. So yeah, let's get started on text animation 5. So I'm just going to copy these 2 layers from text animation 4 by hitting Control C. And I'm going to paste them into the text animation 5 composite shot. Alright, and what we're going to do is double click on the effects to open them in the control panel in the top left, and go to the shatter effect and click the orange arrow, which will reset it to its defaults. And I'm also going to remove the time reverse effect. So this is what we have. Now this effect took me a while to figure out, so I'm actually going to be reading off the attributes that you need to plug in, because I've tried to duplicate it without, and it takes me a long time of fidgeting around. So first thing we're going to do is leave position as it is and go to pattern. And under pattern, we're going to change the type from bricks to custom. And I'm also going to turn off the radial gradient and drop shadow for this. And then I'm going to change the extrusion from 10 to 0. And then custom map, I'm just going to change to like the background. Actually, don't do that. And then under position, we're going to leave it how it is. And now we're going to go to physics and forces. And change the radius to 10,000 and the strength to about 300. And under position, we're going to change the depth from -50 to 0. So now let's go to gravity, change the strength from 500 to 10,000. And then XY direction is going to be from 180 to 0. and the Z direction is going to be 90. And then the floor distance, we will keep it how it is. Now we're going to go to the simulation tab, change the viscosity to 100, rotation speed to 12, randomness to 0, and keep mass variance as it is. Lastly, we're going to go to timing, and what we're going to do is create a new composite shot, and we're going to call this one timing map. And what we're going to do here is create a simple gradient going over our white plane. So let's go to the effects and put a gradient effect. Not the radial gradient, but the color gradient. And we're just going to change the colors. Actually, we're going to change the colors to how they are, except we're going to change the blend mode from add to none. And then we're going to change the start and end points to be vertical. So that we have something like this. And now we're going to go back to text animation 5, drag on the timing map, hit the eye to change the layer visibility. Then we'll go back to the effects, the shader, and then under the timing, which is under the physics, we're going to change the timing map to the timing map composite shot. So if we play through this animation now, we have the text fly up and rotate in, which looks really sweet. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is add a mask to this. And now we can add our drop shadow and radial gradient back on. Or not. It worked on my example, so somewhere I messed up. I'll write it in the description, I guess, because I don't want to waste your time by fidgeting around. Anyways, select the text layer, get your rectangular mask tool, drag it over the text, center it, and now we're going to set some keyframes for the path. So set a keyframe at the 0 second mark and at the 1 second mark. And at the 0 second mark, we want it to be covering all the text. And at the 1 second mark, we want it to be to the right of the page. And then we're going to change the feather strength to around 35. And now we have this kind of effect. Which looks really sweet. Once again, you could just apply a reverse time effect onto this to introduce the text rather than having it go away. So now let's move on to text animation 6. And let's go back to our background composite shot and copy both the layers again by hitting Ctrl C, paste them into text animation 6 by hitting Ctrl V, and what we're going to do this time is duplicate our text for however many letters we have. So in my case, 4 times. And then I'm going to rename each layer for each letter. So in my case, I have one called N, A, M, and E. And what I'm going to do is get rid of the visibility for each of those. Alright, so now what we're going to do is go to each one and keep just that letter. So for the N layer, I want just the N. For the A layer, I just want the A. And so forth. Alright, so now I'm going to go to the bottom layer, which has all the letters. I'm going to change the fill color to something like red, just so that we can see a contrast between these and the other letters. And what I'm going to do is line up each layer. So I'm going to hit V and move each letter so that it matches up. So now I have this, where I can keyframe each layer individually. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the transform properties of the N layer. I'm going to set a keyframe for the position at the 0 second mark and the 1 second mark. And then I'm also going to set a keyframe for the opacity at the 0.15 second mark and the 0 second mark. Alright, so at the beginning, I'm going to move the position to be at the top. And I'm going to change the opacity to be 0. So now you'll see the text fades in and it moves down. And actually I'm going to change the second opacity keyframe from 0.15 to 1. So you should have something that looks like this, which looks pretty sweet. So now what we're going to do is go to the 0.15 second mark and drag the rest of our layers to that point, and then I'm going to go another 15 seconds, move the next 2 layers, and then go another 0.15 seconds and move the last layer. And then what I'm going to do is copy the opacity keyframes from the N, then go to the A and paste them. And then I'm going to go to the M, paste them. And then I'm going to go to the E and paste them as well. So now we have something like this. We just have to keyframe the position of the rest of the text. So let's go once again back to the A, set a keyframe for the position at the 0.15 second mark and the 1.5 second mark. And then at the beginning, I will move it up. And in the N, I moved it up to 275. So I'm just going to copy that number and then paste it into the A. So just like that. Now I just repeat this for the rest. Alright, so this is what we have. And it looks pretty sweet. So now what we're going to do is move on to the last text animation. So let's select all of these layers once again, hit Control C, and then create a new composite shot, and we'll call this one Text Animation 7. And now we'll paste them in. And this one, I saved it for last because it's probably going to take the longest, which I know you guys are looking forward to. So, yeah, let's get started. So let's go to the transform properties, and we can erase the position keyframes, but we're going to keep the opacity keyframes. So we're going to set a keyframe for the scale and rotation values at the end of the layer, at the beginning of the layer, and at the middle of the layer. And this is for both the scale and the rotation. Alright, so at the beginning we want the scale to be 0. In the middle we want it to be around 110. And at the end we want it to be 100. So we have this kind of effect. And now we're going to keyframe the rotation. So for a moment, I'm just going to erase the opacity keyframe from the N so that the opacity is 100% the whole time. And I'm going to change the rotation value at the beginning to be about 45 degrees. And then at the middle, I want the rotation to be about -10. And then it'll go back to 0. And then I'll set a keyframe for the opacity once again, for it to be 0 at the beginning. So now we have this. And you could go with this for all your layers, except what we're going to do next is individually change the anchor point of each text layer. So what we're going to do is move it to be in the bottom left of our text. So we have something like this. And then we're going to realign the position so that it matches up with our original. So if we play through the animation now, this is what we have, which looks really sweet. So now we just copy the scale and rotation properties from the first letter, and we're going to paste them into the rest of the letters. And once again, we do that by hitting Control C to copy and Control V to paste. And now I'm just going to copy my rotation settings. And once again, you can erase the position keyframes from each layer. Alright, so now what we get to do again is keyframe the anchor point of each layer, unless this is the effect that you want. So let's go to the A, go to the anchor point, and move it to the bottom left. Once again, this just makes it so that the object will be scaled and rotated from that point, and then we will move the layer so that it matches up with the original. And now we get to repeat this process once again for the M and lastly for the E. Alright, so now that we have them all lined up, we can erase the bottom text layer and watch our animation. And I'm also going to make each of these layers closer together, so about 8 frames apart. And now we have this. So yeah, that's everything, guys. I apologize because this tutorial was extremely long, but hopefully you learned something. I mean, these are only examples of what you can do. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and I guess just get out there and try to make your own animations and have fun. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you have any tutorial ideas for the future or any pointers that you have for me, please feel free to tell me. So thanks for watching and have a nice day. Bye.